The most important NFL draft in Chicago Bears history. There have been 87 NFL drafts, and the Bears have had the first overall draft pick only 2 times. This will be the 3rd time. What will they do with it? Who should they target? How many players would they like to have back in return, or draft picks back in return if they trade this number 1 pick? Who are the top players that we should know about? We're going to cover those topics, so many more over this season of Draft on Tap. 3.5, 4 months of intense football talk with 2 guys who I respect their opinions immensely. Foster Covers in the chat room said, I've met these 2 draft evaluators. These aren't just guys. No, they're not. And let me welcome in Danny Shimon, who has been co-host of this show since the very beginning. This is your 5th season on Draft on Tap. Danny, congratulations.
Thank you. And that is that's the first time I've seen the new intro. That's good work there, Senor.
Sir, thank you.
Very nice work. Very impressed. But yeah, I mean, ready to kick it off. Excited. This is going to be an exciting time here. This whole offseason for the Bears. You know, going right off a disappointing season that ended up getting them the number 1 overall pick, and now obviously going to free agency first, see how they fill or what kind of needs they fill there, and then from there we're going to go ahead and try and fulfill this draft class. It's only have 8 picks now, but I have a feeling that Ryan Poles is going to come out of this draft with more than 8 picks.
Yeah, that's one thing that we all have confidence that he can do. He can acquire draft picks. All right,
he turned 5 last year to 12. So
how about that? That's a minor miracle, without a doubt. Let's bring in our good buddy Niel Stopczynski. Niel, this is year number 3 for you on Draft on Tap. It is wonderful to have you back for another year so that you can bring your scouting analysis and all the information that you pick up from people in the college football industry that you've known over your years. Welcome back, brother.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you having me back for year 3. Tell you what, new year, new logo, new intro. Everything is new and fresh and exciting, man.
It is. And so is this position that the Bears are in, right, Neil? I mean, this is the first time they've got this number 1 draft pick in decades. Are we going to blow this? I mean, you're a very positive person, Neil, but are you a little nervous about this awesome responsibility Ryan Poles has?
Not at all. This is the best situation we've ever been in the draft of my life. Got the number 1 pick, have all the leverage. We basically run the draft right now. And as Danny said last year, we turned a bunch of picks and a bunch of more picks. And right now we're sitting at 8. We can easily be at 12 to 15 by the time we get out of this thing. So I'm ready to rock and roll.
Danny, what do you think about the fact that this is the first time in decades that the Bears have had the number 1 overall pick? I know you and Neil are cut out of the same cloth in that you love this time of the season, maybe even more than the NFL regular season. What do you think about the fact that the Bears are in this in very enviable position?
Yeah, I'm excited. I've never had the Bears never had the first overall pick in my lifetime. So this is a very exciting time. I mean, we were watching the end of that Texans game before we came on for Bear Football for the post game show on Sunday, and my heart was racing. I was like so excited. I was more nervous for that than any point this season for a Bears game. So it's definitely excited. You asked Neil if you think if he's confident in Ryan Poles. You know what? I cannot sit out here and say I'm confident in Ryan Poles because so far some of the moves he's made, albeit it was more of a tear down than a build up so far, but some of the moves he's made, it's got he's got my attention. So like I said on Sunday, this is now Ryan Poles' team. This is now Matt Eberflus's team. So from here on out, this is where you guys, fans keep receipts, and you can't blame Matt Nagy, can't blame Ryan Pace, can't blame any previous regimes. These are going to be their team, their players, their picks, and their signings, their free agent signings. So we'll see how it goes, but definitely keeping a close eye on Ryan Poles and company and see how they go ahead and utilize this pick to go ahead and gain more assets.
I'm kind of in there with Foster Covers here too. Says he never thought he'd see this happen in his life. Yeah, I think we all could easily say that we never thought we'd ever see this happen in our lifetimes. The Bears being that atrocious to where we have the number 1 pick in the draft. So, hey, we're rolling right there with you, brother.
Well, Neil, and I am interested in the way that you put that. They were so atrocious. Do you think that this team has a huge abyss to climb out of, or do you think that we're closer than the record indicates to getting to respectability, let's say playoffs in 2023?
Two things there. I do think that we are closer than the record indicates. I could think back to at least 6, 7, 8 games over the course of the past few months that we were, within a score from. A ton of those games, at least a handful, where we just got absolutely screwed royally by the refs. That would given us chances to win in those games, put us at least in a better position to succeed in those games, if that makes sense. But, guys, I said a year ago, and everybody listening will probably remember this if you're an avid listener of the show, almost exactly a year ago, I said we got to temper our emotions, temper our frustrations, temper our anger, everything for this upcoming season, because it's not going to be pretty. Now, I thought it would at least be 6, 7 wins, pretty enough. But I also knew that, we're in a massive rebuilding year to where, and as we talked about at length, Ryan Pace left us with nothing in the cupboard and zero resources with which to work with. And so, yes, I'm absolutely positive about this because now we have at minimum $118 million of free agent capital with which to work with. We're going into the draft with 8 picks. I think we're seeing at 4 of which in the top 100 or so. And so that's some things to be optimistic about, moving into this. And, with all these resources that we have now, and, Ryan Poles talked about this a couple of days ago. I can't remember exactly when it was in his, postseason press conference, but he talked a couple of days ago about how, he's happy he has the resources. They're going to go into this offseason. They're going to evaluate everything from the top down. And we're going to come up with a plan here in the next week or two and roll into free agency by March with the plan for that. And then that'll shape exactly what we're looking at in terms of our draft capital and also our draft plan.
Let's take in this episode, I want to take a little bit more of a macro look at this draft season, really off season, before we get into our regular shows where we're going to go more in depth into player evaluations. So a couple of topics I want to touch on. We have to make decisions on free agents for 2023, players whose contracts are over in 2 or 3 months. So let's take a look at some of these players who are free agents in 2023. And as we build this roster for 2023, which players here do you feel are absolute must-sign players? Now, Equanimeous St. Brown, top of the right-hand column there, he is already locked in for on a 1-year contract. The rest of these guys are players who are available. Dan, let me start with you. Who do you think Ryan Pace, he's clearly not going to overpay any one of these guys, right, but who would you like to see him target?
Right. Well, that's what I was going to start saying. Like, if we lose any one of these guys, it's not like I'm going to sit up there and lose sleep over it. But I'm a huge DeAndre Houston Carson fan. I've been a DHC fan for forever. What he filled in, I believe admirably today, or this year, I should say, when Eddie Jackson went down. So, he's not going to be a all pro safety, but he's a guy that's solid veteran. He brings that presence, that leadership in the locker room. Terrific special teams player. And then, like we saw this year, when someone goes down, he can step in and be a solid contributor there in the defensive backfield. So DHC is a guy I would sign. Josh Blackwell, I thought he was under contract, but anyway, but he's a kid that I know they picked him off of the Eagles one of the final cuts there, last cuts. Blackwell came in. I thought when he was given an opportunity to play the nickel, I thought he acquitted himself nicely. He's a guy that I would at least bring back and just kind of put him in the mix there. And also another guy that played pretty good special teams as well. So I think, those two guys right here, kind of stick out to me in terms of guys on the list. Nick Morrow is a solid, veteran linebacker. Depending on what you do in the draft and in free agency in terms of that group there, I think Sanborn is going to be probably your starter at middle linebacker is my guess right now. But if you bring back Nick Morrow, you could do worse, right? So we'll see how that goes. But those three right now just kind of stick out to me. Matthew Adams is a guy that I think I like a lot as well, but he's also a guy that just doesn't stay healthy. When he's on the football field, another guy that on special teams really, comes out and contributes. And also when he fills in, he's a nice, physical presence there in that second level of the defense. So, those are the guys but again, none of these guys is going to break the bank. So, I assume some of these guys will be brought back.
Niel, I wonder if you object with any of those comments from Danny assessments.
Agree with a lot of that. Nicholas Morrow is a guy that, I automatically pegged as soon as we started talking about re-signing free agents as a guy that you want to bring back with the work that he did at the second level this year. I really like what he brings to the table. DeAndre Houston Carson, I kind of feel is this Bears version of Sheriff McManus. He's a guy that really excels on special teams, does all the little things really well, intangibles, as much as you can possibly have. I definitely would not mind having him back. And if you remember, Sheriff McManus was a guy also that continuously signed 1-year contracts, 2-year contracts, just kept himself alive, the ultimate survivor of the last generation of guys that are special team studs. Retired just a couple years ago, but I see DeAndre Houston Carson fitting that same type of mold, and so I would like to have him back. Patrick Scales, he can't ever have enough of a good long snapper that can get the job done consistently. But Matthew Adams, I kind of agree. Would like to see him back. Would love to see him healthy. However, but that linebacker group that we worked with this year brings Sanborn back, and I'm not upset about Sanborn, Morrow, Matt Adams, and Joe Thomas. Those are 4 guys. I think you can mix and match those guys, and of course Sanborn being the absolute beast that he is, kind of anchored that thing unexpectedly completely. Even though we had a lot of very, very positive things to say about him in our draft wrap-up show last year, didn't expect that out of the kid. And then Armand Watts, I thought was a guy that outside of Justin Jones was another guy across the defensive front that actually produced and was a very solid player with his size, with his motor that he played with. Another guy that just came out of absolute nowhere to be mildly productive. I think he's a guy that you can bring back another 1-year, 2-year deal, not break the bank, have some quality depth if he's not ended up being a starter. And then the Josh Blackwell kid, and he played about 5 snaps, but he made a difference in a lot of those snaps that he played, and would nice to see him back as well. So I guess I just talked about half of that roster that you put up there, but I think there's some quality depth on that roster that we can work with. And as you talked about, ESB signing him back for another 1-year deal. I said on Twitter last week when we brought him back, once that contract went through, that's another absolutely quality depth piece of a guy that has great size, consistently reliable hands, very smart, knows the offense, and is trusted.
But that's one thing there we all talked about, and I think you guys all agree. All those guys we named, but they would just bring depth, right? Other than maybe the Nick Morrow
Exactly.
could possibly start. These are not starters, right? So if you go through the Bears roster, you're bringing back guys that give you depth, veterans that could add something to the locker room, guys that can give you some nice backups that have had playing experience in case your starters next year, hopefully improvement, in terms of talent wise, the guys in front of them get hurt. These guys can plug in and play for whether it's a half a game, or a down or two or whatnot.
Do you think that this coaching staff, because Eberflus was asked about his staff, let me play the clip, and this is his response to the question that you can kind of read into that there's some changes coming.
As I said after the game, I'm going to meet with those guys here shortly, each one of them, and we'll evaluate everything as we go. But again, it's the NFL. A lot of things move, a lot of things change, a lot of things adjust. So we'll address that when we get there.
So a big part of building a successful football team is having position coaches who do a good job at developing players. Which position group to you guys do you think was a weakness this year and therefore would put the job of that position coach in danger? Danny, start with you.
For me, it'd be a defensive line. Now, some might say, that there was enough talent there. True. But, like Neil said, Justin Jones had a solid, veteran season. Armon Watts flashed. Travis Gibson came in off of a 7-sack season. He's a guy that I thought was going to go ahead and take off this year and possibly continue to grow. But, defensive line really didn't play well. In terms of, playing the run, they were so inconsistent. 1 week they would, go ahead and stop the run. Next week they would be gashed easily by teams you were not expecting to gash them. So, obviously, then we talked about, the pressure up front, no pressure on the quarterback whatsoever. So I think, the first position group, if you will, that came to mind was a defensive line for me.
Neil, what do you think?
For me, Alan Williams scares me. It seemed like we did a really good job of scheming up adjustments at halftime, coming back to second half. And you're really flipping the script on, what we did wrong in quarters 1 and 2. And granted, that was also when we had Roquan. It was also when we had Robert Quinn. We had more depth. Guys were healthier and everything else. But at the same time, you gotta be concerned when giving up the most points in the NFL over the course of the second half of the season. And that's one of the scary things I thought about. But I didn't want to just hinge on, Danny, I agree. By saying defensive line, I want to bring up another topic that I thought was highly concerning, and maybe that is just a product of not having the talent, not having the depth, guys not being healthy, all those different types of variables that you factor into that. Basically playing like this past weekend with a practice squad team in the secondary. We got to get better field. Number one, we got to get a better game plan with what we're doing with those players. Number two, I think that's across the board. So Flus is going to go in and sit down with all these coaches like we do every single year at all levels of football. We're going to talk about what we did right, what we did wrong, and then there's surely going to be turnover. There is every year. It's just the level to which we have the turnover that is going to be something to talk about here in the next few months.
Yeah.
Well, it's already been reported that James Rowe, I think assistant DB coach, is leaving. I believe, correct?
That is correct.
Took an OC job at was it Georgia Southern or something like that? I forget.
It sounds right. It sounds like a small college. Good luck to him. I thought he did a great job. I mean, he helped he reignited Eddie Jackson's career, and he worked with a lot of young guys in the defensive backfield. And that was really the strength of this Bears defense in 2022 was the defensive backfield. If they would have had a pass rush, they probably would have even more turnovers than they produced. And they did a nice job of producing turnovers late in the season. And early in the season, if I recall correctly, it was kind of a gap in the middle there where they weren't turning over the ball as well. But any other thoughts on coaches before we move on? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to kind of judge these guys because you kind of knew what was going on this season in terms of what the Bears' plan was and what they were trying to do. So that's the thing. Like I have my eye on all these coaches coming into next season because like I said right now is like even like the special teams coach Richard Hightower. There are times that coverages were pretty damn good, and there are just times where there are just people not maintaining their lane integrity. Big returns here and there. So it's I think everyone's going to be under the microscope. Coming into next season, what we assume is going to be a team that's going to be restacked with talent.
Absolutely.
All right, let me move on to another topic. A couple of the players on this team, young players that were acquired recently, are vital for the success of this team. One of them that comes to mind immediately when I think of this topic is Braxton Jones. And Braxton, there's almost like half the Bears fans feel like he should go or be moved to another position, that he's not a promising left tackle. And the other half believe that he is a promising left tackle. And one of his biggest deficiencies was dealing with the bull rush, and a couple of other moves. He was asked about that recently. This was his response. It's a little long, but I think it's a lot of fodder for thought here, not only about Braxton, but about the offensive line in general.
There's a lot of different moves, but obviously the biggest one is obviously the bull rush, but that's the most simple move. Everybody gets beat by the bull rush sometimes here and there. So I would say I just need to be better in that ends. So, when you stop that, it's hard to, keep on going in terms of a rush. Like, people usually they go from doing like a ghost move or a cross chop to then bull rushing, but people start out with bull rushing me. So it just will eliminate those things, and we'll able to open up my arsenal a little bit, and it will just help me. So I think, after this offseason, it will be super important. Obviously, like I've talked about all season, all year, obviously need to, go into the offseason, get stronger. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think it's definitely fixable. It's not like I'm light years away from where I need to be, but I think it's just a combination of a lot of things that will, this time I've never had before. I haven't had a full, how many ever months. It seems like it's going to be forever next time that we're all in this building together. So, there's just a lot of time that I can, maximize that time and work on all those little things, and they will all come together.
Niel, what's the ceiling for Braxton Jones?
Ceiling is whatever he wants to make of it, to be honest with you. He's probably made it further than a lot of people gave him credit for or projected him to go. The thing I love about this kid, first and foremost, that he's a grown up. He does a good job of articulating himself. He has great, personal and football character. He works his ass off at his craft. He came from a place that maybe 13 people heard about before the draft commenced. however many months ago it was, back in April. Southern Utah. I think there's a state at the end of that. Not many people know about Southern Utah State. It is a bottom of the barrel FCS program. Their basketball program is a hell of a lot more noteworthy and successful than their football program is. So he came from a place that he probably wasn't developed all that well. He probably was an under-recruited kid or not recruited at all. But he does have the things that you can't teach, and its length and its size and its athletic ability, and things that we arguably have never had at the left tackle position. With him, it's just a matter of working at his craft, like he talked about, and getting his ass in the weight room and getting stronger, especially in the trunk. He needs to be able to anchor better, so that teams, when they look on film and they see that defensive ends and edge rushers could take advantage of a bull rush, that he takes that particular move away completely, and is allowed to better do his job protecting Justin Fields from getting dirty. And that's something that across the board, I think, especially with these rookies, but across the board with this offensive line group that needs to get better, is guys need to do a better job. Number one, at their craft. Number two, at their technique, but staying their ass off the ground. I think that was another tweet that I had on Sunday about this defensive pass rush that we're facing. I never seen so many offensive linemen on the ground in my life. It was one of those things that is among the other things that are embarrassing about this team this year, but that's something that desperately needs to be fixed. But I think there's definitely pieces in that room. And Braxton Jones, I think you ride with him at left tackle until he shows you, he proves to you over the course of time and years of development. I don't know how many years that is. Maybe that's 2 years, 3 years, whatever the case may be. You run him out to the end of his rookie contract. But I think that you ride with him and see if he can do the job. And, if 4 years down the road, you're still having a lot of concerns about Braxton Jones, maybe that's when you go ahead and make the move to something else.
Now, I know you love Braxton Jones. You think he is the future left tackle. What do you think about what he talked about in terms of improving against the bull rush?
You said Neil. I think you meant me, right?
Yes, I'm sorry.
When you say Braxton Jones in love, that's me. I do love the kid, and I think he's a pillar on this offensive line. I think you build around him, and people are always knocking him, and I even did a Bear Truth episode on him, and I broke it down. I told you this kid's got the size, the length, the athletic ability, the feet that you want at a left tackle position. Is he strong enough? Is he fully developed? No. We talked about him getting stronger. We talked about him when did we do that Bear Truth? We broke him down. It was middle of the season, correct, Aldo? I told you back then he needs to get into the weight room. He needs to get a stronger core. Get his lower body stronger as well, so he can take on those pass rush. His arms, his punch is his timing has got to get better. So that's all technique. That's all coaching that he's going to work on. And once he does that, you talk about a guy that a lot of people kind of knock him because when he had bad games, unfortunately they were like really bad, right? He'd get bullied back into the backfield, or he'd get being really bad, and the quarterback would take a hit. So, but no one ever talked about him for a bunch of times, because a lot of times he was doing his job. He was getting out there, he was blocking. And remember, Ryan Poles, I think, made a great point that a lot of people forget. This kid went from Southern Utah State to the Senior Bowl, right? And then preparing for the combine, goes to the combine, gets drafted, then goes to rookie minicamp, then goes to OTAs, and then goes to a training camp, and then starts every single game, plays every single snap of his rookie campaign in NFL season. And he kind of touched on it here as well. He's going to have a chance now to kind of take a breath and get back and work on his craft, work on that timing on his punch, get stronger, add that lower body strength, add that core strength. I'm telling you, this guy is your future left tackle. For those who keep knocking him, you're just not watching the tape, or you're just listening to these airheads on these 4-letter networks who are, I call, out of town stupid, don't know what's going on here with this team and with these players on this team. So this kid Braxton Jones is your future left tackle. Whoever's knocking him, put the tape on and watch him play a 17-game season. Is he going to get beat? Yes. Is he going to get bull rushed? Yes. Is that a weakness of his? Yes. Is he still developing? Yes. He's a rookie out of Southern Utah State who played 17 games and didn't miss a snap. That's your left tackle, guys.
The amount of development over the past year that kid has put on tape, has shown on the field, is absurd. Right. I don't know, Danny, about you, but I sure as hell didn't think that looking at the practice tape from Senior Bowl a year ago that kid was going to be a starting left tackle for all 17 games.
He stuck out to me, like in terms of his athletic ability, stuck out to me, and I thought he intrigued me. But yeah, coming in and predicting as a 5th round pick to be in and start every single game, no, I didn't think that.
Games.
Yeah, all 17 games. It's amazing. And the thing is, just the athletic ability he shows, especially on those toss plays where he gets out in front as a lead blocker. His athletic ability to get downfield, to be able to bury that second or third level defender. A lot of these big runs where you see Justin Fields coming out on these quarterback sweeps, quarterback power runs, you see Braxton Jones on front leading for him, blocking for him downfield. I know that's not the all end all be all, but that shows some of the athletic ability this kid has, that what he could do. And then again, once he gets stronger, once he gets better as technique, gets coached up better, you're going to see a much improved play. And I'm not going here sitting and predicting he's going to be an all pro, but I'm telling you, he's going to be a solid left tackle at the very least.
Yeah, so Ryan used a really good word on talking about that kid earlier this week too. He used mental toughness. Mm-hmm. The type of ups and downs that he experienced this year, borderline getting embarrassed at other times, and then having the highest of highs at some others. Mm-hmm. I got to give that kid a lot of credit, because he has been really, if he has any sort of mental weakness whatsoever, we have no idea, because he certainly hasn't shown it.
So we all agree on Braxton Jones. At least the three of us agree. Some people in the chat room may not totally agree, but we agree that he is definitely should be the number one candidate for the starting left tackle position in 2023. So let's talk about the other promising offensive linemen. Some are already calling him one of the best offensive guards in football, and that's Tevin Jenkins. So let's listen to Tevin self-scout himself, and then we'll talk about his future, immediate future, and maybe long-term future with the Bears.
I'm a guy who flashed a lot. I had some great plays, and one thing I need to improve on is my consistency on the field. Like, I'll have great plays driving somebody might 10 yards or so, and the next play I might only do it for like a yard, or like not be as great as the play before.
I find that kind of funny. I thought he was going to say lose a yard or so, but he says I only drive him for 1 yard. He's a fascinating story. I mean, this guy was drafted by the previous regime. He comes in, he has injuries in his first season. We learned that he had an injury that was discovered at the combine, which is probably why he fell from round 1 to round 2. He struggles a bit with the new coaching staff. There's rumors that he's going to be traded. There's rumors that he drinks too much beer, all sorts of stuff. He gets moved to the tackle position, to the right guard position, and he looks stellar. So I'll begin with you, Neil. What do you think about Tevin Jenkins? Is he a don't worry, we got our right guard, or wait a minute, he's had too many injuries, we should probably look at some possibilities there too if we get good value?
The amount of injuries that kid has suffered and played with over the course of his first year here is very concerning, especially when we didn't know about the one coming out of college. And there's the other red flags coming out of college as well that I've been talking about on the show ever since we started talking about Tevin Jenkins. But the thing about him is that he also seems like a dude that has a pretty good amount of mental toughness. If he sticks his mind to becoming a better football player, he has shown that he's been able to come back from stuff. The thing about him is that as Danny and I had talked about with him, we never thought that he was going to be a left tackle. We thought right tackle at best, but right guard was probably going to be his bread and butter. We thought that he was going to be a guy that was going to move inside. And just based on his size, based on his footwork, based on his ability to control his space, we thought that he was going to be a guy that would settle in very well at that right guard position. And it seemed like he was, right? It seemed like he was. There's a few games in a row there where it seemed like he was getting the job done. And he gets nicked up here and he gets banged up there and he has the head injury issue. And, there's just a lot of stuff going on with him, from a physiological, standpoint and physical standpoint right now that, we just need to be sure before we say, yeah, that's our definite right guard. But I think, if we're going to peg Braxton Jones as the number one bet to be our left tackle, in the future, I'd also probably do the same thing with Tevin Jenkins because I don't see any other options right now. He's a guy that has shown in flashes, like he said himself, he's shown in flashes the ability to get the job done. And he needs to be more consistent. He needs to, use better technique. He's never played right guard in his life. And so these are all things that are coachable too. So we're not talking about things that are unteachable. We're not talking about character issues. We're not talking about 1-2 or anything like that. We're talking about things that are teachable. So let's get him coached up this offseason, get him in the weight room, get him healed up. Let's give him a full year of not getting banged up and see what we have coming into August.
Danny?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there are two building blocks on his offensive line, and we just talked about both of them right now. Braxton Jones on left tackle and Tevin Jenkins on right guard. I think once he got finally moved over to right guard and finally settled into the position, you saw the kid just get better and better. You saw his confidence come back. You saw him play like a guy that wanted to go out there and believed he could dominate. And some of the guys, when you break down his film, some of his second and third level blocks where he's just burying guys, and it's stuff you love, and the physicality it brings is great. Now, he's got to get healthy, stay on the field. That's one thing. The other thing is his pass blocking sets are very consistent. There's times his timing is off with the snap, and he allows the interior defender to get inside shoulder and get past him. So I think he needs to start get better in terms of pass blocking, and then that's where he's going to have to improve. But he's a guy that I think could be a building block. Again, health is what you first and foremost, but work on that technique in terms of being a better pass blocker. And you got a road grader there at right guard, a guy that can get out and lead and bury guys in the second level and open up huge run lanes and seams for your running back. So yeah, two building blocks and both of them we just covered right now, Tevin Jenkins and Braxton Jones.
All right, so we've looked at the offensive line's building blocks because I don't think any one of you guys is going to advocate for a Alex Leatherwood as a building block. Am I right? I don't know. Neil is rolling his eyes. I'm not sure. Okay. Danny's saying no, but Neil is rolling his eyes. I don't know what's going on.
No, I'm rolling my eyes because I'm saying hell no. That's why I'm rolling
okay, good.
To be fair to the kid, I mean, I would give him another training camp before I give up.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. But you can't count
in
on
terms
him.
of building blocks. In terms of building blocks, no.
Right.
But yes,
right.
I agree because he was a guy that I think both you and I, Danny, if I remember correctly, we did have some positive things to say about him coming out of Alabama.
Yeah.
I would like to see.
Tackle. I thought he could play right tackle. I thought he could play that right tackle coming out of Alabama.
Right. 100%. And we've seen him all over the offensive line so far here with the Bears. Let's find a position for him. But then also, I think I was listening to a little bit of Greg Gabriel's show. When was it? Yesterday, I think it was. I can't keep track of time anymore.
Yes, it was yesterday. Yeah, really.
I didn't get a chance to see all the show, but I was kind of catching a little bit of it when he was talking about the offensive line, and he said something that I think he phrased it as deconstructing the kid and rebuilding him from the ground up, which I think makes a lot of sense because he's had a very unsuccessful, first couple years in the league so far, and I think that he needs to get his confidence back, and maybe the only way to do that is just completely rebuild the kid.
That's what happened with Tevin Jenkins, guys. Tevin Jenkins had lost his confidence because he was put out of position. He was thrown out to the fan base as a future left tackle when he had no business playing left tackle in the NFL, and that crushed his confidence. And he got hurt, and then he got moved over to the right side. Now he's learning a whole new position, and so they basically build him up. And I think with Leatherwood, I think he's got some capabilities. Like I said, I think he could play right tackle in the NFL. Now the brief time we've seen him play, he looks lost. And again, another player like we talked about with Jenkins looks, like his confidence is shattered. So yeah, you go ahead and you let the kid just kind of, sit back there and learn and get better. And then, next thing you know, you might have a starter on your hands. At worst case scenario, you could have a very quality backup.
So anyone else on the offensive line that you would throw? I mean, the kind of the Larry Barroom is obviously not a building block. We have two. We have two in offensive line, and I don't think anyone is going to disagree in the planet Earth that we have zero on the defensive line. I mean, the defensive line and the offensive line are the two biggest focuses, two of the three biggest focuses for the offseason for Ryan Poles, and is going to gather a lot of our attention here on this show. Is there anyone in the Bears defensive line whose play at least – clearly not a building block, but you can say, well, at least we've got this guy. Travis Gibson and Justin Jones are two guys that come to mind. What do you guys think about those guys? Are they even worthy of having on the roster?
Well, are they worthy of having on a roster? Yes. I mean, because you always need quality depth. This is the NFL. Guys can go down in one play and they'll be done for the season. So I think Justin Jones, ideally, he's a rotational guy in your technical defensive tackle position. He's not a starter. I think he's a guy that he could be a nice, solid backup, emergency starter or whatnot. Travis Gibson, like I've said countless times, I came in with expectations that this guy was going to take the next step. He's done nothing but disappoint me this year. So I mean, someone said earlier he's on a rookie contract. We got to keep him around for another year. Sure, you can keep him around for another year and come and have him battle for a position. But for me, other than keeping those guys as backups, or even Armand Watts, maybe a nice rotational guy. You need 4 new starters on the defensive front, in my opinion. I am done watching those guys try and stop the run, try and get pressure on the quarterback. I need 4 new starters coming into camp next season.
Niel, you want to debate Danny on any of that, or definitely agree with him?
I mean, yeah, we're on the same page. Justin Jones is a guy that, I give that kid a ton of credit coming into a situation where you trade away anybody that has any sort of leadership in the front 7 on defense, and all of a sudden he's thrust into a captain role, having provided leadership for a team with a bunch of young guys. I'm not sure if that was explained to him or if that is even, a thought in his mind. It was even a possibility, coming into Chicago, coming into the season. But I give that kid a lot of credit for the way that he played, the way that he handled himself, the way he was in the locker room. He's definitely a piece that we can work with, moving forward. Outside of that, like I said, like Danny said earlier, Armand Watts is a solid, depth piece. Muhammad and Gibson, solid depth pieces, but that's all those guys are. Dominique Robinson, the former wide receiver, the former quarterback, the former this, former that, and the other thing. He's got a lot of upside. He's a big, long guy with some athletic ability and made some plays this year, flashed, here and there at times. Just needs to be developed, and he's one of these guys that we need to see what we have after an off season or two. If he can be a guy that we can count on, coming off the edge, I think he's a really interesting piece. But I mean, outside of that, we signed Gary Green, who's going to be a nice special teams piece, next year and the year after. Maybe I can't remember how long we have him a contract for, 2 years possibly. Somebody mentioned Donovan Jeter earlier that we signed to a futures contract either today or yesterday. But there's a lot of bodies in the room, but not a lot of bodies that you can count on to get pressure, to stop the run, to do all those things that we need to do to be successful.
Yeah, you and I can be in there, be bodies, but we're not going to be very good at it either. So
yeah, exactly.
you need talented bodies in there. Guys in the Muhammad is one of the more disappointing free agent signings. I thought, coming in from the Colts, Eberflus, he's a guy that could, possibly give us something in terms of a situational pass rush. He ended up starting, which was something that kind of surprised me initially, but he was, talk about being ineffective. I don't think did he even have a half a sack this season? I didn't.
I think he had a half a sack. That was.
It must have been some quarterback must have tripped in front of him. He just kind of tagged him down. So
no, he did because he came off the edge. It was a busted play, and I made a comment about how he took that 8-foot long arm of his and threw the quarterback down on the ground. I can't remember what game that was, but I have that play burned in my mind as the one thing that stands out about that kid all year. But he plays hard, and he's raw as hell. He's a UDFA, right? He's raw as hell. He needs to be coached up. He's played 13 positions. We don't know what we have with him yet.
I saw someone post in the chat. Terrell Lewis, is that the kid from Alabama? Did we get him off of the? Did we sign him from the?
He was a waiver guy, yeah.
Did we pick him up? So that's a kid out of Alabama that had some promise. So interesting to see if is he on the roster? Because with all the holiday stuff, I might have missed that. Is he on the roster? I want to see what he does next season in this. I wish he would.
He's not included in the in a salary cap breakdown, but he is still listed on the active roster.
Okay. That's a kid that intrigues me in terms of what he can bring potentially, possibly as a situational pass rusher. Definitely not a guy I'd start. I'm not saying he's a starter, but definitely a guy you can bring in with some depth, another quality body, as Neil put it earlier.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So we agree that the line of scrimmage is where Ryan Poles has his biggest challenges this season. So talk to me about the depth in this NFL draft for defensive linemen. We all know that the two top non-quarterback picks in this draft are probably going to be Will Anderson Jr. and Jalen Carter. But beyond them, if the Bears decide to trade their first overall draft pick, and we'll talk draft strategy to close the show, beyond that, if they were to bypass those top two players, what's the rest of the draft look like for defensive linemen? Danny, I'll start with you.
Well, for me, I don't know if Neil agrees, but for me, defensive tackle right now, so far, all my film study, defensive tackle looks pretty bleak once you get past the first 2-3 guys. So for me right now, and again, I haven't done my final grades, but right now, obviously, the top guy is Jalen Carter, Tuli, and I got to learn his name, but Tuli Tuipulotu, I believe, from USC. Is that the way? Am I saying it correctly there, Neil? He's a guy that they move all around the defensive line. They put him at end, but I see him as a nice, quick twitch 3 technique inside. So, guys got to get stronger at the point of contact, but definitely a kid that gives you that quick twitch ability to penetrate, the gap and get upfield and create havoc in the backfield. So that kid from USC is my next guy. A guy I had a little bit of an eye on, like maybe 3rd, 4th round, Fabian Lovett, but he's going back to Florida State, unfortunately. So yeah. Other than that, now you're looking at guys like. Guys you can project, guys that are either big body, guys that can help you stop the run, but are very limited in terms of what they bring in terms of pass rush, right? So guys in that kind of category where I see them kind of being nice run pluggers, but very limited in terms of pass rush is Siaki Ika from Baylor, big 350-pound nose guard looks like. So I'm not sure how ideal fit he is for the system. Brian Barisi from Clemson is a guy that's dealt with a lot of injuries off the field. I see him as a 5 technique, ideally at the next level, in a 3-4, not a guy here in this system as well. Kenu Benton from Wisconsin is another guy that no one hears about, but he's a tough SOB in the middle of that defensive line, a guy that can plug up the lanes, maybe play one technique for you and be a good a run stuffer, but not a guy that I'm going to see out there every Sunday generating consistent pass rush. So if you're looking for a Gervon Dexter from Florida, another big body kid, guy that can plug up the middle and give you a good run defense. He's just getting started in terms of what he could possibly do. So these are guys that again are not really the big interior pass rushers. The guys that are going to be the pass rushers, that the kick-ass guys that can generate pressure consistently, I think, are going to be Jalen Carter and the kid from USC. So the defensive tackle for me is a little grim once you get past the first couple of guys. Defensive end, though, there's a lot more depth there. And again, I'm just kind of doing all the preliminary work here. There's a lot more guys I got to look at. But I don't, Neil, do you want to attack defensive tackle before I move over to end, or should I just go through with my ends here?
I'm just looking at this from 30,000 feet because I'm nowhere near as deep as you are into some of these player evaluations yet. But yeah, defensive tackle seems to be very thin. few and far between guys that can come in and make an impact immediately, which is why I'm thinking to myself, we have to 1,000% go ahead and go with an impact defensive lineman, whether that be an edge guy and then an interior guy, whatever the case that may be, with that first pick. But going from defensive tackle over to defensive end, there's definitely a lot more depth at that particular position, almost by 3 times as much more depth that could probably come in and either be a difference maker right away or play right away in a certain form or fashion. Looking at all the names of guys that I've seen live this year, just watching all the games that I watch, and also guys I have seen a little bit of tape so far. You can go almost like 15 to 20 deep, before you get into the 5th round in terms of guys that could rush a passer or play the run on the edge or whatever the case may be. So I think, Dan, you've been a little bit more further in depth in terms of valuations and with defensive linemen. What do you think on the defensive end standpoint of things so far?
Yeah, defensive end, again, I agree. I think there's more depth there. I mean, my top guy obviously it comes out is Will Anderson, but I'm still struggling in terms of his ideal fit in this system. I think he's really light in the pants, and I think he's probably like 230, 235. I've heard that he's played last year at 251, so we'll see how he comes in at the combine there. But but he's definitely I think a guy that has got the production on the football field. You see the quick step off the line of scrimmage. You see the strong hands. You see his ability to convert speed to power, get his hands, extend his arms. He's got long arms. Extend them into the chest of an offensive lineman and walk him back into the backfield. You see him. He's got that ability to go and bend that corner with the body control and get after the quarterback. Highly productive player in an SEC conference that obviously is one of the better conferences in college football. So Will Anderson's going to take the top bill there in terms of defensive play. But again, for me, I'm still going through and struggling in terms of trying to find a fit here, because I feel like if you draft Will Anderson, you got to have a good plan to how to utilize this kid, so we'll see how it goes there. But the next guy and a guy that I'm in love with right now, and again, I've just done my preliminary work on this kid, I haven't even dug deep into him, is Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. You talk about a 6'5", 6'6" guy, long arms, arms like tree trunks or tree branches, whatever you want to call them. I mean, the guy can get after the quarterback, athletic enough where, at Texas Tech, they had him, in a 2-point stance, dropping back into coverage. He's not as smooth. His hips aren't as flexible as a Will Anderson, for example, but definitely a guy that gives you some of that versatility. But again, I see him as a 4-3 defensive end. I think he's an ideal fit in this system. And I made this comparison before, and I'm not trying to say he's going to be the same kind of player, but in terms of when he hits players, when he tackles through the quarterback, he tackles through the ball carrier, like Nick Bosa. That's how he tackles. He hurts guys. When he hits you, you feel it as an opponent. So I just absolutely love this kid. The main concern with him right now is that broken bone in his foot. Tall guys with broken bones in their feet kind of scare me. So his medicals at the combine are going to be key to see where he goes. So he's a guy, that name, and we'll get into him more and more so later on in more shows. But if the Bears do trade down from number 1 in that 5-6 range, that's a guy to key on there, Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. The guy I was really interested in was Jared Verse from FSU. He ended up going back as well to college. Some of the other guys that kind of intrigued me, I'm going through a list here. Felix Uzuma from Kansas State, undersized, guy from off the edge. Again, might be more just a situational pass rusher, but definitely a guy that brings some energy, brings the ability of that first step quickness to get into the backfield. And a guy that intrigues me as well is Lucas Van Ness from Iowa. He's a redshirt sophomore. I thought he was going to go back, but he ended up coming out. He declared for the draft. He's a guy that's got the length, he's got the size you want. He's pretty, he's still some work to do on his body. He can fill out a little bit more, but definitely a guy that's versatile. You can play him at defensive end. You can line him up inside at defensive tackle. If you go to a pass rushing situation, you can go with that NASCAR package. He can definitely give you that kind of versatility. So Lucas Van Ness from Iowa is a guy to keep an eye on. And some guy I just did a tape on right now is Will McDonald from Iowa State. Will McDonald from Iowa State, fifth-year senior for a guy that's highly productive. Led the Big 12 in sacks 2 years in a row and ended up staying for a fifth year in he redshirted his first year, so ended up staying, in college through a senior. That tells me, if he went to the advisory board, something didn't check, right? Whether it's measurables or something like that. So I'm interested to see how he measures at the next level. He off the hoof, he's an outside linebacker, 3-4 pass rushing demon. Guys, that guy forced 10 fumbles through his career, and a lot of times you see him bending that corner with that type of body control, like that Robert Quinn type of body control, be able to come around the corner and knock the ball out of the quarterback's hands. A lot of those 10 forced fumbles were probably from that, action there as well. But, is he an ideal fit in terms of as a hand in the ground defensive end? He did that at Iowa State. I don't know if he can do that at the next level, but definitely he's probably 245, 250. You add another 5-10 pounds of muscle, you look 255, 260. He could, at the very least, be a pass rushing specialist, a guy who can develop into a nice defensive end. So, there are some depth there that you can go third, fourth round and bring in some guys that at the very least can be a situational pass rusher, or and then other guys that can obviously be starters for you.
Niel, if we can get your evaluation on any defensive ends that you want to share with us quickly, because I still want to talk free agency and I want to talk draft strategy. And I promised you guys that we will keep our show to 60 minutes. So, yeah, really. So, Niel, any thoughts on DEs, or should we move on?
Yeah, well, I think the one thing that you're going to be able to get in this class is a guy that has a ton of length. All these guys that Danny just mentioned are guys that are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", 250 plus, the exception of one or two. Will Anderson's probably floating between 230 and 240 right now. But you're talking about guys that have a ton of length. They have really good size. They have very good quickness off the edge, able to create separation, and guys that generally did a good job of wreaking havoc in the backfield. Disrupting the offensive process. The Will Anderson kid, just on account of athletic traits, is going to be the first guy taken, because you can't not take 6'4", 230, 240 and obscenely athletic, right? So if that's the guy we end up going with, great. I'm not going to bat an eye at it. You just hope that you can get enough weight on him and he fits within the defensive scheme. But on the backside of that, I'm thinking to myself, since that defensive tackle class isn't all that great, maybe you go with the Carter kid, Georgia. There's a lot of different ways you can go with it. I'm not sure if Danny mentioned the Miles Murphy kid, which is somebody that I've watched a couple times this year and was interesting. Isaiah Foskey, the Notre Dame kid, has set the sack record.
The all bus team, though. Miles Murphy, he comes off the bus. That's what you want your NFL defensive end to look like. But there's a lot of times he's more like linear. He's like a straight line guy. The bend in him is not like the Will Andersons, the Tyree Wilsons, some of the other guys that I talked about, like McDonald's and something like that guys. But he can definitely play, for me at least, a left defensive end, base defensive end, and be a guy you could win with. But he's not going to be, in my opinion, and again, all the preliminary, all that stuff, but he's not a guy that's going to be, for me, the bell cow pass rusher on a defensive line. Miles Murphy.
Oh, sure. I see him as a very versatile player, though. Just given his size and his length, he's a guy that can do that can provide an answer to a few different types of roles across the defense. He's not the electric pass rusher off the edge, but maybe he's a guy that sets the edge, plays the run, provides a physical force on the opposite side. He's an interesting player. I haven't watched nearly enough on him. I just watched him a couple of times in passing this year when Clemson was playing somebody else I've been watching, and he stood out a couple of times. But again, you talk about Tyree Wilson. I think that kid is super interesting. I haven't done nearly as much tape study on a lot of these guys, so I'm just going off of stuff that I've really kind of seen live this year. Things, guys that have stuck out to me, things that have, stuck out to me in terms of traits and, effort, play with, motor, plays made on the field, showing up at big moments, stuff like that. So, looking forward to get, deeper into this class. And I'm sure most of these guys are going to be invited to these all-star games, which is what we're going to talk about, in the weeks coming ahead.
All right. Excellent. Now let's pay attention to the free agency class, because now we've got kind of a sense, an early sense here of where the depth is or not at the defensive line in the college draft. So in terms of free agency, of course, the prized player is Daron Payne from the Washington Commanders. So how much of an emphasis should Ryan Poles put into his efforts to try to acquire Payne if indeed Payne becomes a free agent? Niel, I'll start with you on this one.
I would love going after that kid, just because I remember watching that kid in high school for 3 years, watching him at Alabama for as long as I was there playing Alabama. That kid is nothing but massive, and he's a dancing bear. He's massive and absurdly athletic. And he's a guy that could be a difference maker, just if you look at the kind of traits that he brings to the table. Ultimately, I feel like, with the offensive and defensive line positions, those were the two, positions that we talked about. The trenches are scary right now on this team, and you need to do whatever you can to strengthen that, to solidify that, to get us in position to be able to win next year. You got to tackle both of these position groups with both the draft and free agency, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And that means going after the top free agents available, and also trying to sort of scheme your way into having multiple, early draft picks to be able to pick up multiple, players at these position groups. So Daron Payne, let's go ahead. Let's ring the bell and see what we could possibly, land ourselves with. But 100%, we have to, tackle free agency with defensive line, offensive line, but also figure that into draft picks as well.
And while I'm doing this, you might want to just get some more coffee, because we're going to go over an hour for sure. And then maybe if you can quickly there type away, bring up the defensive end, the free agent defensive ends if you can. But Daron Payne obviously is a guy that everyone wants, but I have a feeling that Washington's gonna franchise him and they're going to keep him. But even so, with Daron Payne, if he becomes available and the Bears do get him, so something to keep in mind, guys. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first year he's ever had double-digit sacks. And I think just look at the defensive line he plays with, or teammates. He's got Sweat on the outside. He's got Jonathan Allen on the inside next to him. And then also he's got, when he's healthy, is Chase Young. So he's got a very talented defensive front next to him. Coming here to the Bears, he's potentially going to be the man here. So, so let's temper some of the expectations with Daron Payne. Definitely would be a starter. Definitely would be my top target. But if they don't get him, it's not end all be all, right? There are other players to go look for. Next on my list, Draymond Jones from the Broncos. He's a guy that played at Ohio State. He's a quietly developed. I think he's about 5.5, 6 sacks. So his numbers won't pop out at you, but he's a guy that's athletic, that can play. What did Eberflus say? He wants long, lean, athletic players, tough as well. And I think Draymond Jones is the next guy in line. Again, he's a guy that's second behind Daron Payne for me. I think Ryan Poles is not going to go out there and pay money for a 34, 33-year-old defensive lineman. He wants guys that are hitting their peak. So Payne, I think 26 years old. Jones, I think is 26 years old. Those are the kind of guys he's going to go after, right? Next up is Javon Hargrave from Philadelphia. He's a guy, he's 30 years old, so he might be a guy that they might kind of take, pump the brakes on. But again, another guy that's physical up front. He's got the ability to get back into the backfield and make something happen there as well. But say he's up in the tooth there, and say you want to go for a cheaper option, a guy that's always wreaks havoc but is always unfortunately injured is Sheldon Rankins, and he's currently on the Jets. So these are the 4 guys that I'm looking at. And with Rankins, he plays an ideal inside 3 technique. So if you get like a combination of Payne and Rankins, or Jones and Rankins, and then kind of offset that with some of the depth we talked about with a Justin Jones currently on the roster, and Armon Watts, I think that's an upgrade. It's not the perfect solution, but then again, you're always going to be able to add to that position, whether it's in training camp, whether it's trades down the line, whether it's the following season, but you are going to upgrade that position. So those are my 4 interior defensive linemen that I'm looking at right now. And then in terms of defensive end, Neil, I agree with you. The Bears have to attack the defensive line both in the draft and in free agency, right? And he touched on Jalen Carter, and Jalen Carter is a guy I was going back and forth today with Berlissimo on Twitter. He's a guy that I put on his tape, and I'm expecting so much because I've heard so much about him. But that motor runs cold, man, but when it's hot, it's impressively hot, right? And I talked to if you ever doubt that, if you guys watch the college football semifinals, or you watch the championship game, it's like Jalen Carter doesn't do much. What's this big hype about him? Yeah, he didn't have his best effort on those 2 games, but you put on the LSU game, put on the game with the conference championship game. He was dominant. I mean, he was just absolutely dominant. Swim move into the backfield to drop the running back for a tackle for a loss, be able to get back into the backfield as a pass rusher and just bully offensive lineman into the quarterback. I mean, just the brute strength, the power he has at the line of scrimmage. And he's only 24, 23 years old, I think it is. So I mean, this is a guy that has the potential to be that racket, that havoc wreaker in the middle of that defensive line. But the thing that scares me is You know, it's like you see a lot of this on tape. And another thing is, to his defense, I don't like the way Georgia used him. Right? You know, there's times I see him two gapping. There's times I see him running this defensive tight end loop where he's like running around like a big loop trying to get back, and he's like totally just taken out of the picture. So, you know, that's what they had him do there, and I just didn't like the way they used him. But if you let him loose and let him go back and penetrate and get into the backfield and utilize some of that point of attack power and strength, obviously coach him up, obviously develop him, obviously stay on him. I think he's a guy that can give you that. But with the first pick in a draft, if you stay at number 1, is that a gamble you want to take if you're Ryan Poles? It scares me. So, you know, but so you're going to have to attack from both the draft and free agency, what I was trying to say. But, you know, that's what I'm saying. Like defensive tackle, if you don't get it in the draft with either one of these two guys we talked about initially, you probably have to attack it heavily in free agency.
All right. Let us talk then about draft strategy, because if the Bears are going to sign a defensive lineman and it's a tier 1 defensive lineman, like many people think Payne is, and some of the other guys, Marcus Davenport is going to demand tier 1 type money because the salary cap goes up, and so salaries go up. And we saw by Roquan Smith signed the highest contract ever for a linebacker. It's quite possible that some of these free agents, if not in 2023, certainly in 2024 and beyond, are going to sign some incredible contracts. So my question to you guys is, and Danny touched on this a bit, but how much do you want to, at this point of the rebuild, do you want to invest that kind of money, $25 million a year contracts, to a player, or do you still want to continue to build the base of the team, given how bare the cupboard is right now? Does that make sense? And if so, hopefully Neil can bail me out there.
Yeah, you know, with all this free agent capital that we have, you want to get the type of pieces that fit within what you want to do on the field and what you want to have in the locker room in terms of, you know, character and in terms of what's the word? I mean, just from a character standpoint, you want to have the right type of people in the locker room, right? And so I think when you put those two things together, it has to fit the scheme, has to fit the locker room. I have no problem with spending as much money as we have to spend in terms of, you know, free agency to be able to do that. I also am going to be a little bit, you know, I'm not going to be all that happy about spending a massive amount of money on one player in free agency as well. I know we have all this capital and everything, but I think, you know, the thing that Poles said in his press conference is that he wants to be disciplined and he wants to, you know, stay well within, you know, the program that they're trying to build here in Chicago. And, you know, as long as they're doing that, I'm going to be fine with whatever decision that they plan on making. He talked about that, you know, incessantly during the press conference about, you know, staying disciplined, staying within the plan, not overreaching, not overstepping, not playing, you know, not making moves with emotions, but, you know, being smart about what we're doing, staying well within the realm of where we're trying to be as a team. But again, we have to get the right pieces in place as well. So there's a fine line you need to walk there. As I said before, you got to hit both of these position groups in you know, the draft and free agency, and see what you can make you know, work with the ability of spending resources that you have. Let's just not, you know, get crazy. I know a lot of people want us to, a lot of fans, a lot of talking heads on TV want us to just go ahead and spend an absolute F ton of money since we have it. But let's just because we have it, just because we have, you know, $1 million doesn't mean we need a $1 million car, right? So let's just be smart about all this. Let's do the right things.
And listening to Ryan Poles, I think he's going to be smart about it. You know, I don't think he's going to go out there wheeling and dealing like the Jacksonville Jaguars did last you know, later. Yeah, I mean, they made the playoffs, but, you know, they spent a lot of money on players that I didn't know if they were worth that much money. Anyway, I think Ryan Poles is going to be measured. I think he's going to have his target. I think they're going to be guys in their mid to, you know, early 20s that he's going to target, and he's going to, you know, kind of bring in as part of this foundation of this football team. I get Payne and Draymond Jones. Some of these players are falling in that category, but I think he's also going to know that there's a limit, right? And he can't go bunk crazy on a particular position, but because he's got a ton of holes. We haven't even gotten to receiver. We haven't even gotten to, a center. What are you gonna do at center? What are you gonna do at right tackle? These are all positions you're gonna have to fill. They may not be a free agency, but there are going to be, positions they need to fill. One position that when they asked Ryan Poles, what are some of your blue chip positions? He named defensive end or defensive tackle,
defensive line, O-line, corner. Just general positions, right?
And no one talks about corner because we both agree that I think they have their young corners in Gordon and Jalen Johnson. But I think they're going to go out and they're going to get themselves a nickel corner because, with this defense, you saw how many times they're majority of the time they're playing 5 DBs back there. So I think they're going to go out there and they're going to get themselves either a nickel corner, a veteran like a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson from Philadelphia, or another veteran, maybe, so, there's going to be money spent around, right? We talked about linebacker. We haven't talked about, we all assume Sanborn is the middle linebacker. We talked about Nick Morrow being a cheap, okay starter, but, what if they go make a splash there? So, there's other areas. Plus, he wants to resign Cole Kmet. I think he wants to resign Jalen Johnson. Darnell Mooney's a guy he wants to resign. Maybe he resigns David Montgomery. So all this money is not going to just be, Ryan Poles is not going to start, opening up the cash register on March 16th, whenever free agency opens up, and just buy everybody. So I think he's going to be measured. I think he's going to go after a certain position, and whatever he doesn't get this year, he's going to try and fulfill it in the draft, and whatever then is still a need. Obviously, there's that second or third wave of veteran free agent. You can bring in like the Riley Reeves, guys like that can, 1 year contracts, guys that maybe you can fill in for a season or two, and then go back shopping again the following offseason. So, I think it's going to be measured. I think that's the thing. Just the hope I have, and again, I'm going in it with both eyes open and both eyes squarely on Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham and see what they do there. I want to see who they bring in, who they attract, and who they go after. But I think, I think in terms of being measured, I think he will be measured. So I think I thought I was going to build a team with young veterans, and then also obviously with the draft.
That was the term foundation you used. That was the one that he used several times during his press conference the other day. Talked about the foundation moving forward, building on top of the foundation through evaluation of the franchise, attacking the weaknesses. You talked about the 2023 expectations, getting better, bringing in good players, finishing the tight games. And the way you do that is bringing in more playmakers. The next step is to have a stair step type of process. And he wants to make sure that they're making long lasting decisions. Not just stuff for the moment, not just stuff because it sounds good on paper, not because it's going to make the fans happy, but stuff that's going to allow this program, this franchise, to actually have a measure of longevity about it. And we haven't had that. And I love the fact that he mentioned that.
The one thing I just want to temper everyone's enthusiasm. I know it's great to have the first pick. I know it's great to have all this cap space, but guys might not be available. Deron Payne might not hit the market. There's certain players that we've earmarked, that Bears going after and signing because they have all this cap space. They might not be available. So you're going to have to temper the market and understand that there's multiple ways of attacking and building a team, right? Everybody talks about, we're going to trade. I've seen on Twitter, we're going to the Colts. We'll trade this with the Colts. Who says no? Well, you know what, guys, those type of trades that you guys are putting out there, those are generally for franchise quarterbacks. Right now, I know, Neil, you haven't started looking into them. I mean, I don't see a true franchise quarterback out of this, that's class. Will Levis right now is my top rated quarterback, followed by closely by Anthony Richardson from Florida, and neither one of them I think is day one starter next year. I think Anthony Richardson has the tools that's going to make offensive linemen and offensive coordinators and head coaches that are offensive minded drool over his skill set, but he's way far from starting. I mean, his mechanics are all over the place, and his accuracy downfield is and his decision making is spotty at best. So, but the 6'4", 230. Cannon for an arm, lightning quick release, the ability to be a dual threat quarterback. I think he's going to someone's going to fall in love with him. He's going to be pushed up. So what I'm trying to say is the key is having one of these teams that, because it takes two to tango, right? So having one of these teams fall in love with one of these quarterbacks and give up that haul, and they say, all right, this is the guy we want. Yeah, everyone keeps playing that clip of Ballard saying, yeah, I'll give up anything to get my quarterback. He didn't say that quarterback's in this draft. Yeah, he didn't say the quarterback's in this draft, right? He didn't say that. So, to assume that someone's going to want to give heaven and earth to go get a 5'11", 190-pound dripping wet, average arm strength quarterback Bryce Young, like Mike Tannenbaum seemed to think on ESPN. I have no idea who, but I pray that one of those, teams that are desperate will fall in love with a Bryce Young, will fall in love with a Will Levis, or will fall in love with Anthony Richardson or whoever it is, and then give Ryan Poles that haul or that the multiple draft picks to move on. My thing is whatever trade he makes, and not my hope is he makes a trade back, is I want him to get a first round pick in next year's draft. That's something that I'm going to hold out for if I'm Ryan Poles. Is you can give me a second this year, you can give me another player, but I need a first round pick in next year's draft as well.
Absolutely
Good
love that.
stuff,
I had a
gentlemen.
starry look in my eye because the dog jumped off the couch and surely was about to raise hell, but it didn't, thankfully. But no, I completely agree with you. I think that there are all kinds of situations that we can run into trying to figure out who is our dance partner for these trades that we could potentially execute. And I mean, when you're talking about strategy, like I said to open the show, we have all the leverage. We basically run the draft right now, and it's an amazing place to be. Right, we can go ahead and hold out and stick with the number one pick and pick exactly who we want, who we fell in love with in terms of Ryan Poles and his staff, or we can talk with any one of these top 5 to 10 teams. Right, the moves that we could essentially work with, get with multiple teams and top 5 to 10, trade down several times or one time. I mean, you can end up with anywhere between 1 and it could end up with anywhere between 2 to 4 more picks. In round 2, if you play it right, if you go ahead and incrementally trade back and just accumulate draft capital on top of itself, and in that way you can end up with multiple picks in the top 50, multiple picks in the top 100, and just build talent as you go throughout this draft. That's one of the scenarios. Or like I said, you can just stay put where you are, take the guy that you fall in love with. Or scenario number 3, make that one best pick you could possibly come up with. Make the team that's going to go ahead and effectively move heaven and earth for you. Don't drop too far back, so you can still get your guy, but still get a bunch of capital in return. I think there's so many ways that Ryan Poles can play this. It's really exciting. I don't think we should get too all up in our emotions about it, because ultimately we're going to make the decision that's best for this franchise, and he is not going to do anything that strays outside of the consistency and the foundation that he has built with on the field and in the locker room for the Chicago Bears.
But the one thing we have to be prepared, guys, is if the trade doesn't come and he doesn't get value,
right,
what he feels is value we have to be prepared that he could use that pick to pick a player. So we can't be disappointed and say, oh, whoever it is, Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, whoever it is, or Tyree Wilson. Oh, this guy not worth the first overall pick. Well, you know what? If no one's giving you what you value as what's worth that for that first overall pick, you're gonna have to go and make the best selection for your team. And so be prepared for that. Obviously, we're all three of us, and a lot of the fans are wanting them to kind of trade back and get that haul. So, but just be prepared that if it doesn't happen, he will have to make a pick.
All right.
I don't think it's necessarily making a haul though either. If you look at, some of these teams that have early picks in the second round, so you're effectively, trading back to get additional, first round picks, right? You trade back, you trade, ones, then you also go ahead and get a second round pick with it. You look at teams, I'm pulling up this draft order right now for, second round picks. There are a handful of teams that have first round picks in the top 8 that also have second round picks in the top, 3, 4, 5. You're looking at the Houston Texans, Indianapolis Colts, Raiders, Panthers, all have picks within the, if you're talking about the second round picks, fall, within the first 8 picks of a second round. If you're able to orchestrate something like that to where you flop your first rounders, go ahead and pick up another second round pick. So you essentially have your one first rounder. You go and have an early, second rounder. You have your normal second rounder, which is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 56, I think. And you also have the second pick of the third round. That's a hell of a deal, guys.
Right, but you have to have someone that's one, because typically those kind of trades it's for a quarterback. It's
partner,
for,
right.
So that's what I'm saying. One of these guys or one of these teams has to fall in love with these quarterbacks. And the one thing that really hurts right now is that first pick in the second round for Claypool. That is a pick. You understand that is a leverage pick. I mean, teams, once that first round ends, teams start calling and asking what you want for that first pick in the second round, because everyone goes back home or overnight. They redo their board. They kind of go over the first round and see who's available, and that's where you can get quality picks. For that year, later on in the draft, or even next year. So that trade of that pick really stings now.
Very good. Let's get to a few questions that our friends in the chat room have offered. Hugh Heavens asks, is Will Levis going to be this year's Zach Wilson? So I'm not quite sure what Hugh means by that. Does he mean that Zach is Will going to jump up the draft boards like Zach Wilson did? And Zach was chosen number 3 overall in the NFL draft? 2? Okay, and so, or is he going to be somebody who disappoints as Zach Wilson has? But either way, anyone want to comment on this question from you?
So Zach Wilson was your boy, Neil. You want to go and comment on that?
Yeah, what was my boy? I didn't realize his head was so far up in the clouds as it was, where he was, more worried about, banging moms than he was about, playing football and all those different types of things.
Allegedly.
Oh, hell, it wasn't allegedly. It was confirmed. Come on. I mean, good for him, though. Yeah, I mean, the kid's clearly got some game. I don't know, good for him. But there's a lot of stuff that have come out well after the draft that you don't like. The whole I'm now canceled for winning Zach Wilson. Hey, I can admit when I'm wrong, though. I'm not sitting in these meetings. I'm not sitting in these meetings. There is Neil's now canceled for winning Zach Wilson. I'm not sitting in these interviews, grilling these kids about their background, about their personal history, about what's important to them, putting them on the board and things like that. I mean, the kid has a skill set. Just a matter of he doesn't have the wherewithal up here, at least right now, to be able to put that skill set in a functional fashion on the field, which is, I mean, it's really disappointing because he showed a lot of things during the pre-draft process and during the season that, led you to believe that he could probably be a really interesting player in the NFL, but he clearly doesn't have it upstairs. And that's the thing with both of us. Like, we always don't get a chance to dive inside the mind of all these kids that we're talking about. We're effectively, specifically talking about what they bring to the table on the field as athletes, physically and athletically. Right. And so that is why the pre-draft process in terms of the interviews and in terms of the sit downs, the top 40 fly-ins and, going on campus and working guys out, all these different types of things are so goddamn important because you need to have an idea of what's going on upstairs with these kids before you bring them into your franchise. And maybe he just pulled a really good cloak over everything that was going on with him during the pre-draft process to be able to shield away all those concerns that could have possibly popped up had everybody known what was going on. He had another incident with, him and his wide receiver, same girlfriend, different dude, like type of thing, going on, the mom thing that, he seemed to be lost in the lights of the NFL process itself. So, those are all things that are red flags. Like had I heard about those, on the front end, I wouldn't have been as, on board with the kid. But, see, here's the thing. Again, he just needs to be straightened out. I think he's still a young kid. I think he's still immature. He's still naive. He still has a ton of talent. And if there's a team out there, and there will be a team out there that will go ahead and try to fix the kid, so to speak, right? Air quotes, fix the kid. There will be somebody out there that will. And, he's going to be given a second chance if it doesn't, end up, being in New York with the Jets. But, it's a really interesting thing there. Now, if we're going to go ahead and talk about Will Levis having the same type of mental limitations in terms of being focused on the right things, good football character, all about football, film junkie, leadership on the field, everything about him just screams consummate, professional. If there's a deviation away from that, then yeah, I'd be concerned about taking that kid high. But again, like we're not inside the mind of Will Levis. And so what we're seeing is a guy that can't perform on the field. What's going on upstairs. And those are things that all these scouts are going to figure out between now and April.
Well, for me, Will Levis, in terms of how he is compared to Zach Wilson, obviously the whole intangible thing we don't know because we're not there meeting the kid. But what I do like about Will Levis is he's coming off of a bad season this year, mainly because a lot of the guys around him are not the level. The level of his teammates isn't up to par as what it was last year. What some scouts like about him is obviously the prototypical size, about 6'2.5", 6'3", 230 plus pounds. Is a pretty athletic kid, big time arm, can make all the NFL throws. His best season was the last season when he had I forgot the guy's name, but his last name I think is Cone. He went back to the Rams. He was with the Rams. He came last year, was the offensive coordinator with Kentucky. So he played in a pro style system. He's got pro style concepts, and that's when he really had his best season at Kentucky. Again, Will Levis is a bigger kid. Same type of arm strength, and he plays in the SEC conference as opposed to where Zach Wilson played in BYU. BYU, Zach Wilson was hidden back there. He was a guy that was, came on late, and all of a sudden, the next thing you know, he was, he kind of blew up on the scene and had a huge, pro day, and next thing you know, he's being now picked number 2 overall. So for me, I have Will Levis. I think, obviously none of these guys are sure things, but I think Will Levis is a guy that a lot of NFL teams do like because of the prototypical size, the arm strength, not a bad athlete, and the fact that he has been familiar with NFL concepts, been in an offense that has run NFL concepts, and he's done it in the SEC conference. So I think that's why Will Levis right now is probably going to be your first quarterback taken, in my opinion.
Ravi asks about favorite running backs in this draft. So just give me one name of a running back that you've looked at and you say, wow, this guy can bring this to the Chicago Bears. Niel, I'll start with you.
Go ahead and start with Danny. I'm not that deep into that class yet, or that position group yet.
Go ahead, Danny.
I've started just kind of on the preliminary here as well with the running backs, but obviously I think Bijan Robinson is a first round running back. I think he's a guy that's got a first round grade for me, not top 10, but definitely a guy you can get in the 20s, probably like in that Najee Harris range, 22 I think where Harris went. So obviously Robinson is a guy, but you're talking about the Bears, so Bears are probably going to get one if they go running back, probably day 3. I'm thinking. I don't think they go high in either 2 or 2nd or 3rd round. So day 3. If you look at day 3, and I'm thinking about okay, David Montgomery. Assume he's not with the Bears, right? So you have Khalil Herbert and Darrington Evans and the kid from the kid from Baylor. I can't think of his name, but I'm if you think about like day 3 guys, some names that intrigue me is Rashawn Johnson from Texas, the teammate of Bijan Robinson. He's another guy that, big, solid, he's not as explosive, if you will, like a Bijan Robinson, but he's another in between the tackles runner, a guy that's, pretty good out of the backfield making catches. Sean Tucker from Syracuse is another guy that will surprise some people. And I think if he goes to the 3rd, 4th round, you'll see him kind of, a lot of teams kind of like him. I know Jamar Gibbs is a kid from Alabama that a lot of people like. So I think he's, late 1st, early 2nd. I think Chase Brown from Illinois is a solid, solid pro prospect there as well. If you're looking at, Kendrick Miller from TCU, he's a kid that really tough kid, about 5'11", good frame, another in between the tackles runner, another guy that's got, leadership on a football field, another guy that gives you an option in terms of being a pass catcher out of the backfield as well. So, those are the kind of guys you're looking at. If you look at, Zach Charbonnet, is that how I pronounce his name?
Charbonnet.
From Charbonnet. Thank you. UCLA was at Michigan, went to UCLA. Another late round guy that intrigues me. Deuce Vaughn is a guy, is a small guy, kind of think Darren Sproles, but as a guy that can get the ball in his hands in the open field, might not be the ideal number 2 running back, but he's a guy that can be a weapon. It can be a returner for you. It could be a punt returner, kick returner. Also be a guy you can get those jet sweeps. Again, you just want to get playmakers on a football field here to complement Justin Fields. So some of the names, and we'll get deeper into this class as we go along here in Draft on Tap.
I sure hope we don't go into this draft absolutely talking about running backs, to be honest with you, because that would mean that David Montgomery's no longer in the conversation, and that would make me a very unhappy camper.
All right. Well, let's. Why would you pay? The market value for David Montgomery right now, according to Spotrac, when they compare salaries of other football players, is about $9 million for David Montgomery. So, Niel, would you pay $9 million, let's say over, $9 million average salary over 2 or 3 years for David Montgomery?
For a 3-down back with that kind of toughness and leadership and work ethic, 1,000%. Not even a question.
I wouldn't pay that much. That's $9 million that I could use somewhere else, especially on a team that's got this many holes. And I love David Montgomery. Don't get me wrong. I love Montgomery. I think he's a hell of a character, a leader on this team, part of the foundation that we were talking about. But my hope is because this free agent class is sort of top heavy, that a lot of the big contracts will kind of go their way, and then next thing you know, the market will kind of come back down to the Bears in terms of maybe bringing back Montgomery on a maybe $5-6 million deal per year. Maybe it's a short-term deal, it's a 1-year deal, come back into free agency next year. Maybe it's a 1-year or 2-year deal, who knows? But for me, it's I never give running backs second contracts unless they're special. And David Montgomery, why I love the kid as a person, as a football player, as a leader. He's a very solid running back, but he's not a special running back. and I can bring in a guy from, in this third round of this draft, the fourth round of this draft, and pair him up with Khalil Herbert, and I'll have a solid foundation in terms of my rushing attack. Plus, remember, guys, Justin Fields is a big part of this running attack as well. You're not going to expect him to run 1,000 yards next season, but he gives you that added bonus of being someone that can also carry the football for you as well. So, putting that much money into a position like running back where you can get someone in third, fourth round that come in and be a contributor, I wouldn't do that, especially for a guy that, albeit great guy, great team leader, but just not special.
Yeah, see, that's the concern that I have, though, is finding, not really finding a running back, but with the holes that we have in this team, using something in the third and fourth round on a position group that we could easily just wrap up and have squared away for the next 3 to 4 years. I would 1,000% keep Montgomery and use all of our day 1, day 2, and early day 3 picks on offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, corner, and maybe go ahead and get another tight end as well, and see if we can find a receiver that can complement the group that we already have. I think that'd be kind of foolish.
We kind of just poo-poo the fact that they might go out there and sign a free agent. But what if Ryan Poles says, you know what, I think Tony Pollard would be a hell of a compliment to Khalil Herbert. And I talk about more than 9 million, probably 10, 12 million. So again, that's too rich for me for a running back, but I think he gives you something in terms of not only the ability to run out of the backfield, but also to be a slot receiver, a guy that can be a weapon in the passing attack as well. So, we can't just kind of dismiss it. Not that I would do it, but also kind of throw it out there and say, all right, you never know, because what he said is he's just going to kind of continue to grow this offense and bring playmakers in. And I think a kid like Tony Pollard fits the bill as well.
Great conversation, guys, and we've got a lot more football talk ahead of us over the next several weeks. Every other week, I should say, Draft on Tap right here on the Barroom Network on this Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central time slot. And then every other week, it'll be Gabriel Talks Football at Monday afternoons at 2 o'clock or so. So we'll have a show dedicated solely to the draft every week right here on the Barroom Network. In addition to that, we will be announcing in detail early next week all of our plans for our premium draft coverage. And so we've got a lot of great details, and it's going to be a really attractive package for people who love the Chicago Bears and love the draft and looking at the draft through the eyes of people who are thinking about how they fit into the Bears system. So it's going to be an exciting 3-4 months for us here on the Barroom Network. Let me go around and get final thoughts. Danny Shimon, anything you want to share with fans before we pull the plug on this episode?
Yeah, that content you talk about, it's going to be awesome, guys. It's going to be when Aldo breaks it out, you'll see how much information you guys will be getting about all these players and all these prospects. And again, just our first show here, and I'm already excited. I could go another hour or so talking about some of these prospects here, but definitely exciting times. Definitely something to keep tuned in here into the Barroom Network, because we're going to have you covered from wall to wall. And Aldo and I are going to be heading down to the East West Shrine game at the end of this month. So we'll be down there and seeing some of those guys in practice live, and then also we'll be covering the Senior Bowl as well. So there's a lot of players that we're going to be going over here the next couple of months, really. And just stay tuned. Obviously, we love you guys' participation. We know you guys know this stuff inside out as well. And if there's any players or any team or whatever you want us to kind of talk about or break down, just hit us up, either Aldo, myself, or Neil. He always puts our Twitter handles out there. Just go hit us up and let us know who you want us to cover, and we can break it down for you guys easily. So looking forward to it.
Neil?
Yep. Moving forward, guys, we always love when you have questions for us, when you ask us to break down guys. Feel free to hit up the Twitter handles, hit up the DMs. Let us know who you got questions about, or wherever the case may be. Funny, Tony Salamonski. I saw that one there. Who got shot? I'm assuming he's hearing the sirens going on in the background here. You never know what the hell's going on down here in the South Loop.
It's the city of Chicago, baby.
You never know what's going on down here, man. I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you, it could be any number of things. But the thing about it is, this is an awesome neighborhood. I never thought it was going to be this amazing, living basically across the street from Soldier Field. So I mean, this is a really cool deal. And so on that point, who knows? We may have a live on remote down in this area, near Soldier here in the future. We've all three of us been talking about that leading up to the show today. Going to try our best to figure that one out. Nothing's set in stone, but I think that'll be something interesting and fun and dynamic and exciting going on in the near distant future here. Before we put a cap on this draft class. But shit, guys, we're just getting started. So what I'm going to be focusing my attention on going forward is these Senior Bowl rosters, the Senior Bowl roster, the East West Shrine roster. Going into this All-Star stretch that we're moving into. And then also, if you look at January 16th, that's the deadline for kids to declare for the draft for special eligibility. And so within the next 4 days after that, by the 20th, all of the NFL scouts, GMs, coordinators, everyone within personnel department side of things are going to have the finalized draft list, and then they can really actually get to work now. So in terms of deadlines, that's what's coming up around the NFL. In terms of what I'm diving into, all these all-star game rosters, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be exciting. It's gonna be absurdly time consuming with my day job. So I'll sleep in May, right?
There you go. Exactly.
But,
the day after the draft.
100%. But like us, follow us, subscribe to the YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcast from Barroom Network. We're excited to have you guys on. We do this for you guys. It's a lot of fun for us, but we do it for you.
And one other thing, besides attending the Shrine Bowl game, we're going to have all the practice footage from the Senior Bowl, which the guys have had the last 2-3 years. And so that's going to really help in the analysis of these college prospects. So for Danny Shimon, Niel Stopczynski, my name is Aldo Gandia. We'll see you here next week. And bear down, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.